podcast, How Stories Shape and Change Our Lives. Hello, friends and listeners. Welcome back. If you haven't already listened to my last post about the tale of the half-man, I would encourage you to do so, as it is fun and interesting, and it also sets the tone for this episode and forthcoming episodes. In relaying to you the ideas behind the title of this episode, the Faustian bargain between power and Eros, we must begin at the moment where the wound or wounds are first inflicted upon us, creating various forms of trauma, and how trauma is used as a mechanism to suppress and punish people for speaking truth to power, of which, by the way, a journey of individuation is itself a form of. Trauma steals away our connection from soul by causing us to go numb, to go to sleep inside. And this is a protective mechanism. The horror of the traumatic event is often too much for the feeling functions of the human being, of the soul itself, to bear for the one who is being traumatized. The onlooker of the trauma, i.e. anyone else who is either causing trauma or numbing themselves from the reality of what is happening to others who are actively being traumatized, are nevertheless subject to trauma secondarily. In other words, trauma has a ripple effect. The protective mechanism is the same, which is to internally shut down the feeling functions of the human soul and try to pretend that nothing bad is really happening. Those who wish to claim power over us know that they must do everything in their means to kill off the spirit of Eros within each and every human heart and soul, and its capacity to feel and love everything very deeply and very passionately. The soul captures and returns back this Eros to the natural world by way of aesthetics, such as creativity and art, things that we can touch, things that we can feel, things that we can experience. And this experience of Eros and the aesthetics of it were and have been regarded in countless ancient cultures as divine or godlike. Acts of creation, creativity, lovemaking, aesthetic experiences all come from these divine nectars of life that reside in all of us naturally. Aestheticism is the experience of life as an exchange of give and take, of relational experiences embodied and earthed, as opposed to some form of transcendent detached mysticism. And this aestheticism is characterized by revelry, sensuousness, and playfulness. In the aesthetic experience, the soul is allowed to have its own awareness, to feel deeply every part of itself, and find purchase to develop its own way to express itself in the world. The opposite of this would inevitably be a world which is disembodied or detached. Dr. Devin Demler states, quote, "The enemy of the aesthetic reflex is indifference. It is anesthetic," end quote. It is this reflex that those who seek to repress soul and Eros through power and domination are aiming for. They include acts of violence, rape, brutality, oppression, depersonalization, colonization, annexation, occupation, imperialism, etc. What the perpetrators of power fail to acknowledge, or more precisely, actively repress the knowledge of, is that the human soul is not, in fact, monotheistic. It is polytheistic, meaning that there's different parts of our personality, and they're all different. They have different aims, different purposes, carry different stories about us. And when we're traumatized, some parts of us indeed do need to shut down and go to sleep, especially when being actively brutalized by violence, be it physical, psychological, emotional, all of the above. And in the case of the victim of the brutality, this is a necessary coping mechanism in order to survive. Not only the experience of the brutality, but how that experience will change them for the rest of their lives. In the case of the onlooker of the acts of brutality is the secondary trauma of indifference. Fortunately for us, as human beings, there are other parts of the human soul that, while may lie dormant, are nevertheless equipped to respond to brutality in different ways. These other parts of the soul are going to start fighting back eventually, if repressed for too long or provoked for too long. Their response, born out of rage, rebellion, resistance, that deep, guttural, anguished scream of "no more," is inevitable. It is a rage, rebellion, and resistance born out of deep love, Eros, for the integrity and preservation of the sanctity of the human soul, psyche. This reflex or reaction is both destructive and salvific at the same time. It is the reflex to reassert the existence and the sanctity of the soul back into real life or the real aesthetic world. It is the assertion of the inevitability of the experience of the human soul that cannot be ever killed off fully, with one exception. This is where we come to the one who makes the Faustian bargain to trade in one's very soul for power. No one else can take away or destroy our soul completely except for us. We can do it if we so choose. One of the reasons we have so many abundant myths of demons and dark creatures stealing the souls of human beings through Faustian-like bargains is because there is, in fact, a way for humans to bargain away their own humanity, their very soul, to kill it off completely. The many cruel emperors and dictators of the world would be the most glaring and recognizable examples of this, and they are the ones who bargain away their humanity in completion in trade for power, which then makes them perpetrators. In the modern language of psychological diagnosis, we might recognize these kinds of phenomenon with terms such as sociopath or megalomania or malignant narcissism. Their code or ethic, so to speak, is just simply this: violence and then silence. My friends, we are living in a moment of history where an all-out war is being waged against the human soul. And all of us are being forced to reckon with this type of epic, mythic tragedy unfolding before our very eyes. We are having to reckon with this in the form of our many political leaders and other people in positions of great power and wealth who have happily made the bargain. We are having to reckon with that same tendency within ourselves. For many of us, much of what has had the privilege of laying dormant within the complexity of the human soul and its shadows, our privilege is no longer to keep there. We are being forced to reckon with many things about our own human nature and experience that we have chosen to ignore, repress, or remain culpably ignorant of. We're being forced to reckon with the reality that how we choose to ensoul ourselves or deny our souls is having a greater impact on our entire species and the very planet of which we inhabit than most of us are comfortable acknowledging, particularly in how we have chosen to relate to each other, as well as relating to the natural world and all its living creatures and ecosystems. We have perpetrated the manifest destiny over the people and the lands of the earth, and now we are trying to complete the manifest destiny to conquer the human soul and spirit. The Mother Gaia is screaming out in pain as she absorbs our own pain and as we are absorbing hers. We're all being traumatized right now, whether we know it or not, whether we're willing to acknowledge that or not. We no longer have a choice as to whether or not we can opt out of this reality. The sheer number and power of evil men eager to make this Faustian bargain for power and control at the expense and termination of Eros completely and the aesthetic experience completely of being fully alive and fully human appears to be increasing by the day. If there is a rage that appears within you in response to this, give it a name and honor it as sacred. It is the deepest indication that you have managed to keep hold of your own soul, even under the most oppressive, trying circumstances and dreadful conditions. It's important to name it and treat it as sacred. If we do not or cannot or will not recognize it as such, it's far more likely and doomed to act out beyond our own purview and act out harmfully, adding more destruction to the already consuming fire of dread and hatred being cultivated and perpetrated by those who have already bargained their souls away. That rage reflex, if not seen and honored and included, will attempt to grab its own form of power and control and autonomy over all other parts of your own soul that are equally divine and sacred and also deserve full expression in the embodied world of yourself as well. This continues to be our work right now as human beings in the mythic sense, and the mythic sense includes, by necessity, the communal, the political, the moral aspects of human cohabitation with all other beings, human and non-human alike, on this planet. Those who have managed to successfully bargain away their souls can only look upon the rest of us who have chosen to keep and preserve and protect our own humanity with hatred and contempt, and they want all the rest of us to play that game too. It's the only game they can play. That's part of the bargain that they chose, whether they knew it or not. For those of us who are in pain, who are feeling the pain of the oppression, of the trauma, because we are unwilling to sacrifice our very souls, we have to actively practice new levels of care, self-care, compassion, kindness, mindfulness, and a more intentional curiosity towards ourselves and with each other in a way that most of us have never really had to do, I think, before in our lives. We need to laugh, grieve, rage, and dance with each other, holding each other where we are, not trying to fix or solve each other, but rather raging against and refusing to accept the narrative that we as human beings are nothing more than problems to be solved. That is the narrative of power. That is the narrative of empire. It is the narrative of the soul less. But that is not ours. And if we're going to hold on to it, we have to do it together. So welcome, fellow ensouled and wounded people. Welcome to the resistance.